Watch Dogs is an open-world third-person shooter released in 2014 for Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, PC, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and, oh wow, Wii U apparently. Watch Dogs built much anticipation due to a stellar reveal at E3 in 2012, but upon release, it was met with generally mixed feedback due to technical issues, downgraded graphics, and a few other things I'll address later on.
Oh, what the hell?
Now, 6 years later, graphical downgrades and botched releases are somewhat an industry standard, so I can't help but wonder, was Watch Dogs really as unimpressive as many claimed, or was it just a casualty of the changing times? Ooh, a talking moose? Don't know why that exists.
You're a habit I'd like to kick with both feet.
Oh, I think that was a leap of faith I just heard, which means Watch Dogs must be a Ubisoft title. Here comes the Just Dance Panda to spin the wheel of controversy. Round and round it spins, wherever it lands, no one wins. Ladies and gentlemen, the wheel has somehow landed on two categories at the same time. This actually happens a lot. During their E3 2012 press conference, Ubisoft would make a lasting impression when they ended their show with a mysterious project introduced by a video explaining why modern networking and surveillance technology should terrify you, leading to a gameplay reveal with visuals and gameplay that blew the minds of everyone watching, myself included. As Watch Dogs came closer to release, though, fans started to notice that the visuals were not up to par with the initial reveal. By the time it finally released in 2014, the damage had already been done. Through a combination of various online articles, video comparisons, and word of mouth, Watch Dogs had a pretty poor reputation by launch day. In addition, there was an issue preventing the PC crowd from even playing on launch day, and some even longer than that. And then, of course, there were the bugs and glitches that most of us would only see in YouTube videos. See where I'm going with this? I played Watch Dogs on PS4 at launch and faced no performance issues at all. Feeling so confident in this being the case on PC, I captured this review's playthrough on PC. And well, let me just say, don't play Watch Dogs on PC if you can avoid it. Now, aside from one mission that required a ridiculous fix, the game is completely playable. It's just not optimal with a mouse and keyboard, especially when driving and operating cameras, and there are some visual glitches here and there. Just to be sure that I wasn't falsely remembering my launch experience, I played a good bit on PS4 in my own time off stream. Not a single technical issue, and I felt the experience was much smoother than it was on PC. So, Watch Dogs definitely has issues on PC, but is mostly stable now, with the console version appearing to be rock solid. Regarding the visual downgrade, sure, it happened, but the game still looks and runs pretty darn great for coming out 6 years ago. Visual downgrade doesn't equal bad game. It just usually means that the devs aimed high and had to make sacrifices to retain the overall experience. And with that out of the way, let's finally talk about the game. This car is not really going to live for much longer, so let's give it a Viking funeral. What? No! What? What?
Shut up already!
You shut up! The story takes place in Chicago, where a company known as Bloom has launched CTOS, an operating system built to operate and connect an entire city. Turns out, when you connect an entire city on one network, the term key to the city takes on a much more important, literal meaning. Every bit of power, money, and most importantly, information the city has to offer is within the grasp of whoever holds the key. So let me guess. We play as a hacker out to make a name for himself who ends up with the keys to CTOS, a huge target on his back, and not much outside of his hacking skills to defend himself with, right? Meet Aiden Pierce. He's a fixer, highly capable, intelligent, lethal, and cunning. The city knows him as a vigilante they call the Fox. Aiden ends up with full access to CTOS and has no interest in what it can offer him outside of his quest for revenge. Oh, and he's our main character. Huh. Well, Aiden and his partner Damien end up with some unwanted heat after a job gone south, which results in his niece Lena being killed in an attempt on his life. Aiden becomes consumed with avenging Lena's death, and okay, I see where this is going now. We get access to CTOS, so we can spend the duration of the story hunting down the shooter, right? Okay. Well, after refusing another partnership with Damien, Aiden's sister and Lena's mother, Nikki, gets taken hostage by Damien until Aiden meets his demands. This is where the story takes place. For a title that deals with such big concepts like a present-day, somewhat Orwellian state, Watch Dogs is, for the most part, a fairly small-scale revenge story. It doesn't take the approach many might expect, but that doesn't make it bad. What are you doing, Aiden? Get up! Damien was a hateable villain that worked as an end goal while being mostly a background player, causing me to underestimate him just in time for him to hit back hard. Lucky Quinn appearing only a few times to help keep him creepy and threatening each time. Clara and T-Bone were good supporting characters that filled the same role but in different ways at times, with T-Bone especially making an impression, believably walking the tightrope of comic relief and extremely capable. While I found myself initially wanting more of Jordy, anything more would have likely made his relationship with Aiden come across as more than the strictly professional dynamic that they had. Still, the interactions between the two were wonderful, especially when their contrasting personalities were on full display. The two missteps for me were Nikki and Iraq, whose part of the story had a huge side quest vibe, even though it was pretty much the whole second act. And Nikki isn't a bad character, but her interactions with Aiden don't often go past reminding us that they're siblings. Even when Nikki's been taken hostage, their banter usually turned into them forgetting that she was in mortal danger. Speaking of Aiden, in our preview I talked about how I remembered him as a very engaging character that was widely deemed uninteresting because he lacked the humor of Jordy or T-Bone. Now that I've played him again,
What you want?
You're gonna be my eyes and ears inside Rossi Fremont.
No, man. Iraq will kill me.
Yeah? What will he do when I send him everything I've got? You wanna see more?
No. Just erase this shit, please.
Well, you play along like a good little bug, and I will. I'll be in touch.
seriously, how could anyone not see how awesome this character is? Aiden is extremely focused and efficient, though also controlling and obsessive due to feeling responsible for Lena's death, which rightfully acts as the driving force for most of his actions. Even though you'd think he's most well known as a hacker, Aiden seems to be the most in his element during interrogation, intimidation, or any means of manipulating an individual, which begs the question I alluded to earlier of why he was the focus of this game specifically, rather than someone more rooted in hacking rather than the multi-talented hitman side of things. Which comes back to the theme of this game really suffering from a misconception of what it was trying to do.
But promise me you will stop.
I promise. I had my fingers crossed. Luckily she wasn't looking at my left hand. Barely got out of that lie alive. Let's move on to gameplay. Watch Dogs is just another Ubisoft title. Open world with missions appearing as you progress, and a large amount of playtime, depending on collectibles and side activities like enemy outposts. And of course, you can't forget the light RPG progression. Fortunately, these are all things Ubisoft does quite well for the most part, and Watch Dogs is no exception. As expected, Chicago is a highlight here, specifically its residents. People in Chicago are the horniest people of any city in an open world game. Every single NPC can be scanned and in many cases hacked for various benefits like money, items of interest, and even potential crimes to prevent. Even to this day, I'm impressed by this mechanic and how it would give even just a little bit of personality to every character in the world. I found myself rarely turning the casing mechanic off, making navigating the city a bit distracting, but I feel like it was a clever way to connect us to Aiden's obsession with information and control. Seeing Chicago through his eyes and a wall of pop-ups and data in the way, and seeing most individuals for their usefulness, reducing them to their most exploitable quality. Oh! Oh! Did you know that guy had a computer science degree? The city ends up feeling very alive. It's all quite impressive, as long as you don't look too far behind the curtain, especially with first responding vehicles, which seem to behave more like animals roaming the wild. This is the game now, guys. We're gonna figure out where this ambulance is headed that's so freaking urgent. It's being stopped by literally another ambulance. Alright, we've made a circle. That's what's happened so far. I bet he's gonna go through that field again. He's probably just driving a loop. Oh, he's mixing it up. Oh, okay. We're on this way through the field now. Got it. The driving is fine, with a controller, mind you. The shooting on the surface seems pretty basic, but with the inclusion of bullet time and different melee and vault takedowns, the combat can look pretty dynamic and engaging. And that's before even talking about the hacking abilities, which open up several different opportunities that often reward preparation and, of course, surveillance. I think many of us were expecting that the hacking would feature a decent amount of depth as well as width, but ultimately the mechanic ends up an impressively wide pond that is sadly too shallow to make a splash. Just stop standing in front of explosives, my guy! It wouldn't really be one of my reviews if I didn't talk about the underlying story themes for a minute. A few spoilers ahead, so skip to the time on screen if you'd like to avoid them. Aiden spends most of the story focused on one goal, saving Nikki. Because we see through Aiden's perspective, this is all we really are allowed to know, with only some scattered breadcrumbs along the way to tease the bigger picture. So when confronting Lucky Quinn towards the end, he is certain that Aiden's warpath was to retrieve the blackmail on the mayor for himself in a power move, when in fact Quinn, Iraq, and everyone else who fell to the Fox simply put themselves in the line of fire when they crossed the wrong guy. An even more compelling line of thought is that to Quinn, Aiden was probably seen just like we the player see the average NPC roaming the street just before taking something from them. All actions have consequence, whether seen or unseen. This goes hand in hand with the morality system in the game, which is based not in Aiden as a person, but rather how the city itself perceives him based on his actions, showing that even the observer has observers of his own. Like when Jax looked at Aiden differently after observing him kill his pursuers. Maybe it's all a convoluted way of saying be mindful of your actions, but the message is still strong, albeit not one you might expect based on this game's reputation. I wonder if this will work. Watch Dogs feels like the product of two distinct voices having to find a lot of middle ground. The concept of playing as a hacker vigilante who can control the city itself is a strong one, but so many decisions made within that concept are so bizarre that it's hard to determine whether its core DNA lies more within the John Wickian revenge plot or its larger concepts like the dangers and excessive integration of technology and society in our own lives. But is it forward compatible? Those expecting a game akin to Grand Theft Auto with a lot to do and expansive online modes will probably be disappointed. However, there is a comparison I have yet to hear anyone make that feels right to me. Watch Dogs is kind of Ubisoft's take on a Remedy title, like Max Payne or Alan Wake. Hear me out. Like Max Payne, or Alan Wake, Watch Dogs uses the literal narrative voice of its lead character to provide exposition in an engaging way that fits the character itself. Aiden's internal monologue feels sort of diegetic, in that his exposition used for our benefit sounds like the actual train of thought of an overly analytical semi-sociopath. Much like Max and Alan are the voices of a tortured cop on the brink, or an author writing the events taking place respectively. The combat features a gimmick that ties directly to gunplay. Think of Aiden's hacking as Alan's light. And though the digital trips seem like a fun, meaningless distraction at first, some of them are actually a dive into Aiden's psyche, which, though I don't have a specific point of reference other than maybe a dream sequence from Max Payne, it did give me an overall Remedy vibe. My point remains that Watch Dogs does still have value today, and with Aiden confirmed to return as DLC in Legion, now might be a good time to dive back into his story. Just maybe try to not play it on PC. What?